Hi everyone, welcome. We're down here in my wormery and I'm preparing to check in on a couple European nightcrawler systems that have now reached 300 days of age today. These systems were last checked in on 12 days ago when they were 288 days of age, and we anticipated that today we would try to get it on the schedule to come in and check in on the oldest of my system to see how they're coming along. We've been gradually trying to see if we can get the material in these systems to dry off a little bit, so the plastic covers came off and we've got paper on there now, hopefully allowing the systems to become a little bit more crumbly and loose. And crumbly and loose is good when you want to separate the worms from their castings using a screen, but we hinted at it last time and I think I'm going to follow through with the idea of migration, which is something I haven't done in a while. I've been separating worms from their castings using the screen method for a while now, and I think it's time to get back into the arts and crafts fun of creating little partitions for the feeding zones and get a migration started. So that's what my game plan for today is. So let's get this stuff up on the bench and let's get to work. So here you can get a better look at what's going on with these horizontal migration feeding zone partitions that I like to make. They're pretty well perforated, punched through numerous times to permit worm traffic. So basically one of these things will go in here to separate the nice beautiful finished castings that the worms have been creating over all this time from a freshly built horizontal migration feeding zone, which I've even created a little mix of shredded paper cardboard over here. I've also got my leaves and my spray bottle. So we're going to kind of craft a little on the fly fresh environments for these worms to be drawn to. Hopefully we create something that they like, and kind of like what we've already been initiating now for a little while with these paper coverings is the ongoing promotion of drying of the material that they inhabit now. So it's almost like a push and a pull in a way. You're kind of pushing them out by letting the stuff continue to dry, but you're also to a certain point trying to pull them in because you're putting out some really nice fresh bedding for them, some yummy foods. I chose a couple delicious things, stuff that's among their favorites typically. Cantaloupe and pumpkin is what's going to be used to stock the horizontal migration feeding zone. I'm wondering, since we're setting up horizontal migration feeding zones, maybe it wouldn't hurt just to grab whatever's really easy. A couple pepper stems, couple pumpkin seeds, and some scattered bits of leftover bedding, and whatever else I managed to locate. And then once in a while you hit just a piece of material that looks like it just came out of the shredder, It's got these sharp, crisp edges. Clearly not a thing has nibbled on this thing in all the while. And a lot of times I don't pay that much attention, but sometimes I do want to unload some of my castings on my friends and family because I have so much, but I'd hate to be littering their yards with sloppily created worm castings that have all kinds of synthetic materials in them that are not going to break down. I am careful. I mean, if you're a regular here, you'll know that already, but I'm not perfect, that's for sure. So I don't know, sometimes I'm interested in the details and pick stuff like that out. Other times I don't even give it a second thought. So I've got this little plastic container we can set some of this material aside in, and then we'll put it to better use in the feeding zones rather than letting it remain within the material. So this stuff is throughout. There's always the option to screen, but in terms of just getting the worms moved out of their environment, I'm opting for the migration. I'm hoping that the drying of the material also reduces the number of springtails. All these little tiny white specks you see everywhere, these are all springtails. They've retreated down into the material. In the past, they would always hang out on the top. A lot of them would even gather on the top covering plastic, since a lot of moisture would condense on the plastic. They're very into the moisture. And speaking of moisture, I'm really liking how this stuff all seems to just crumble apart into little bits. It's like here too, some sort of a fabric thread. You know, this could possibly even be a throwback to the early days of these systems where we composted a couple t-shirts. So those were the standout novel projects that we embarked on in these two systems. One system, I believe this one number 1, got a Microsoft t-shirt, and I think bin number 2 got a Roxio t-shirt, or vice versa. And in my spreadsheet, I was a real nitpicker about counting any little last bit that they still hadn't finished yet, so I had these little tiny scraps of stuff that was still kind of lingering, but otherwise the t-shirts had been pretty much completely consumed. But in my spreadsheet it says 123 days. I'm thinking it's closer to 100 days or less. But just really quick, back to this material here as far as moisture goes. I think whatever we had at some point observed as possibly too much moisture, I think is very slowly and steadily vanishing. I mean, I still see a little bit of a little bit of clumpiness here and there, which I think is still possibly, yeah, you see, I mean, if I pinch it a little harder, it does go, but there's very little of it. Very large parts of this material do seem to have dried out to the point where almost all this material seems almost like it could easily go through a screen. So that's really nice to see. I just figured a good aeration of the material, and then I guess when we're done, it wouldn't be a bad idea to already have a little spot carved out for our horizontal migration feeding zone. So we might as well do that over on the edge closest to you. But you know what, before we finalize that, let's make sure we're in as good shape over here in bin number 2. I mean, I did see what appeared to me like a moldy piece of something. I don't know if it's a dead worm, possibly in the process of being decomposed. Here's another little stem, and another stem. So let's give this system a good little spin around. As you can see, we've got springtails here as well. But it does seem to me like we've got a similar kind of drying and conversion of the material from being kind of muddy and clumpy to now almost being like a smooth flowing consistency, which is really nice. So let's give all this material a quick little spin. It just feels like if I've at least dislodged it from the bottom of the tub and kind of broken up the big huge chunk, then that's already like to a certain degree a nice aeration. I guess just based on how much it breaks apart on its own without any help, I can already sense how it's doing as far as kicking off excess moisture. So I suppose I wouldn't mind if the springtails were to go away here and there. I just do remember a couple of these things I bumped into earlier were larger chunks, so I wanted to grab those too. But let's see about getting this aeration and inspection of the material done over here. Very nice. I'm kind of at a point in my transition from winter to spring, or I guess, I don't know, it's still pretty early, more than a month before the official start of, the official start of summer. The unofficial start of summer is only a couple weekends away, but the point is that the furnace in my house is running less and less. And like, especially on a day like today where it's super humid, I can already feel the increased humidity in the air within the house. And when there's humidity out here in the air, basically that stifles the evaporation that would be happening down here in the bins, you know? I mean, if the air is very dry, then it's kind of going to suck moisture out of materials, speeding up the evaporation process. But once humid summer here in New Jersey rolls in, I mean, yeah, I run climate control a little bit and cool the house when it's really important and very, very intolerably hot, but a lot of times I just tough it out, don't bother using the air conditioning too much. And well, that just means humidity in the air in the house, especially down here in the basement. I'm definitely not running air conditioning down here in the basement, so the air down here definitely gets as humid as the outside and stays that way pretty much all summer. So I've been transitioning from plastic covers to paper covers in many systems now to try to avoid things getting really sticky and muddy and clumpy as a result of the inability for systems to lose excess moisture to evaporation. Sorry, every now and then I just get a little distracted by how nicely this material flows. Like a moment ago, I just kind of pushed a little bit of this stuff aside and it all crumbled so nicely. And I'm also starting to question whether I created horizontal migration feeding zone partitions that are tall enough. They're a little bit short, but yeah, I think we'll be all right. I'll just have to sort of do it at a little bit of an incline over here, maybe just backfill the divider to the point where it hits the top edge, but don't want to have all kinds of beautiful castings spilling over into our horizontal migration feeding zone. We want to keep the nice beautiful castings for future gardening purposes. I'm also being kind of careful here. I'm not sure if it comes through on the camera, but I am pretty much up at the rim of these bus bins, and I'm just always nervous about kind of not paying attention and just swinging around one way or the other and end up pushing all kinds of stuff off onto the bench, down onto the floor, making a big mess. And to me, it just seems like an ounce of prevention in that area is well worth the investment. But we're almost ready to get into the setup of these horizontal migration feeding zones, and I think it'll start with kind of picking out the spot where we're gonna make the cutoff point. And I guess it doesn't have to be terribly big. We can increase its size later on, so why don't we sort of wedge it down into here, roughly speaking. Does it need to be that big? I think it should be okay like that, right? We'll set them both up at the same time so we can kind of size them up relative to each other, make sure we're being consistent. But then we could start coming in with a whole bunch of brand new, fresh, never used bedding, dry. So I'm definitely not rolling out the red carpet here, obviously. I'm not going out of my way to create a highly interesting space for these little guys. The space will just have to transform into being something that interests them on its own. I'm running a little bit low right now on my prepared bedding, so I figured I would leave that off on the side and just grab some of this stuff that's not been prepared yet and use this as the stuff that we create our horizontal migration feeding zones with. So let's get the food in. I've not really gone overboard here on the feeding, as you can see. Just a couple little morsels. These are night crawlers. They really like their bedding, so I'm assuming that the nice damp bedding is going to be also to their liking and possibly attract them as well. Maybe a lot of them just end up in here as happenstance. I never really know what's going on when it comes to worm behavior. It's almost like I'm just taking a shot and keeping my fingers crossed. Hopefully they do something close to what I was hoping for. But in a lot of cases, I'm not holding my breath. Alright, so, it does seem to me like perhaps a little bit more bedding would have been a good idea out here. I don't like the idea of having like fragrant little things going on where it's just going to attract bugs. So we'll have to get a little bit more to cover up with, but I'd first like to see how backfilling over here works and see what we're left with. I mean, I didn't think that the material was going to get this deep, to tell you the truth. I mean, it is sitting up pretty high over here. And I'm just trying to level this off to the point where we could just consider it as okay, but it just feels like if it's going to be trying to dry, doing so through this much material might be difficult because it is so deep. So I don't know. Let's not forget about this stuff here. I was just reminded of this tasty assortment of leftovers, chunks of corn cob, chunks of pepper stems, other odds and ends, perhaps a banana peel or something like that. And I'm starting to feel like this should be all right, and I shouldn't be a worry wart. We'll come back in here at some point in the near future and we'll confirm that we like what we see. So let's just be less of a worry wart and do the old, what is it? Not ready, aim, fire, but ready, fire, and then aim. Alright, so let's see how we did over here too. I mean, perhaps these feeding zones are a little bit bigger than they need to be. And if we end up feeling that that's really the case, then perhaps next time we can make some changes. But I think this is a good start, you know. Get the migration of these worms started out of their castings. Continue to let this material out here dry just by being more or less exposed to the air. And I'm even questioning whether or not we need to do much covering of the finished castings. Perhaps if we even use one of the covers that was resting out on top of the castings as part of their horizontal migration feeding zone, and then just come back with a single piece for I suppose keeping stuff a little bit damp here on the edge is probably a good idea. So we can cover up partially uncovered, partially covered. And I like the way that looks. So let's go ahead and douse these feeding zones with some moisture, and then we'll be done. Before we do that, I'm sprinkling on a little bit of pulverized eggshell to serve as grit, and now we can moisten. Sometimes when I'm setting stuff like this up, I feel like I could have gone overboard on the application of water. And I'm not too fond of having standing water at the bottom of my system. So sometimes I'll kind of prop up the end of the bin to force the water to flow into a certain direction or to stay in a certain location. So I'm thinking maybe we'll do something like that here too, just to make sure the moisture that we're adding stays over in the feeding zone, and then what's out here on the edge closer to me is really just going to be geared up for drying, and hopefully as a result of that, worms depopulating it. So it just reminds me I've got a really nice ingredient that we've not yet used for that, which is leaves. So it doesn't have to be much. We're just going to drop in a nice little sprinkling on top so that the foods are covered up And I'm questioning whether the moisture that came in with the foods, as well as the moisture we just sprayed in, whether or not that's going to be enough. Should I add some more? Yeah, what the heck? Give them some more. Alrighty. I think that should do nicely. And I'm definitely liking the idea of this just kind of rolling over and becoming top covering for the feeding zone. And then the feeding zone, I think we'll also get a plastic top covering, because that section I definitely want it to remain nice and damp. I don't want it losing any moisture at all. So I've got nice little pieces of plastic that we can place right over there. They're bubble wrap, and I use them when I run bins in square buckets, and they work as like a really nice top covering in those cases because of their size, but I think they're going to do really well here as well. So we're pretty much done. I've only got a couple things here left to take care of, mainly stuff to be cleaned up and put away, but that stuff's boring. I'm not going to waste your time with that. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.